thought, let's go back to the root of power and get back into Parliament and privilege, and we'll speak to our very own member of the House of Lords, Natalie Bennett.
Well, thank you very much, and there's some people here who've already heard this, but the question I get asked a lot at the moment is, but what do I call you? You call me Natalie, just like you always have, just to get that clear. But I thought it would be lovely to kind of make the day a full circle, to try and tie this all together. So I want you to sort of vision back and go back to that video, American video that Fatima started with. And it was very American, but you could still saw the lovely images there. And that's what I think we have to be doing far more of, and I very much hope we can have a British video like that soon. But that's a kind of didactic, telling people how things should be kind of video. So what I always do, whenever I'm talking to anyone who might be in the creative industries, or involved in making things and doing things, is basically at the moment, we were talking in the session I was just in about what we want to ban. And I'm not entirely serious, but I do really want to ban zombie movies, apocalypse novels, and television series about the end of the world. Because I bet you can think of probably dozens of each one of those out there at the moment, and they're all the stories of death and disaster, and it's all just down on a terrible outward thing, and everyone dies, except for, the hero, possibly. And what I want to see is someone to make a Hollywood rom-com. Boy meets boy, boy loses boy, boy gets boy again. Set in 30 or 40 years' time, and it's all worked out fine. Everyone's walking and cycling, every home is beautifully insulated, no one even thinks about being cold even when there's snow outside. People have secure incomes, there's very little inequality, and the relationship plays out as human relationships do. And we have so little of that kind of picture. And I think Fatima made the point really well. We're asking people to go towards some big change, but we're really not doing a good enough job of painting for them what that looks like. And that's really scary. And one of the things that I think was really important about what she focused on was the concept of democracy. And we have to sell this to people as an idea. I was talking about advertising. We can use advertising techniques for good purposes. Now, I actually did a debate a week or so back against a BP economist. I get to have all the fun jobs. And the topic was, can we do without fossil fuels, or dear, oh dear, oh dear. And I said, okay, I'm going to do the politician thing and turn this around and say the question should be, isn't it great that we don't have to have these polluting, expensive, disastrously destructive, democracy destroying, think Nigeria, lots of people in this room are old enough to remember the name Ken Saro-Wiwa, disastrous fossil fuels that have allowed a few companies to dominate the world's economy. Isn't it great that we can generate our own energy with solar panels? Isn't it great that we can redesign our streets for people, not cars? We've got to turn this round and say we're offering people something wonderful. And if you ask the question, and actually yesterday I was with, someone was talking about heating homes and gas boilers, and I was with, some of the people from one of the gas companies who was telling me how what we have to do is put 20% hydrogen into the gas pipes, and that has to be the transition fuel. And those of you who, many people in this room I know have been involved in the anti-fracking movement, transition fuel is a phrase you know to be very, very wary of. People who sort of say business as usual with a bit of added technology is invariably the wrong thing. What we are talking about here is system change. And I want to pick up Graham's point here about the ban on glyphosate. And I entirely agree with that call for a ban, and I've signed a petition, and I'll certainly join in if I can. But I actually had a chance in the House of Lords. It was the first time I got to do a question where you have to pop up and yell, my lords, at exactly the right volume in the right second, and then you get to ask the Minister a question. It's very, very weird. But I actually had a lot of fun doing this, and you can have a look on the website. It's only a little video of about a minute or so. Because we were talking about pesticides. And I got up and said, well, great, you're talking about reducing the use of pesticides. And, you know, he mentioned the ban on neonicotinoids, said proudly about the ban on neonicotinoids, this will be the one that the British government fought tooth and nail right to the bitter end. But I referred to a study that had just come out in Nature from Japan that showed how neonicotinoids had basically just killed all the life in a lake near where they were being used. And I said to the minister, isn't it time for us to stop this cycle? Because we've been through cycle after cycle with pesticides. It comes in, it's the new wonder chemical. It's harmless, it won't hurt a fly, well, unless we want to kill the fly, and it's wonderful and it solves all our problems. And a few people start saying, but we're seeing this side effect and that side effect. And then gradually we fight and fight and fight the manufacturers, and usually sort of 30 years later it gets banned. And I said to the minister, isn't it time we stopped going through this cycle and didn't just say no glyphosate or no neonicotinoids and said no pesticides? And it's really quite hilarious if you watch his response. Because if you've ever seen a man having an absolute panic, he just throws out about, he's only got to do it for 30 seconds, but throws out about 6 sentences, which don't refer to this at all and make no sense at all, but there's just certain buzzwords he's stuck into sentences. Because the idea of system change is still a very foreign thing in Westminster, broadly across the range. But what we've got to do is show people how system change makes their lives better. So one of the things I haven't heard mentioned much today, but I think has to be part of the Green New Deal, is a universal basic income. Yeah. Because what's terrible about our fossil fuel society now, about the structure of our economy, is so many people are hideously insecure. People do not know if they can put food on the table, keep a roof over their head. Pretty well all of us tonight will see the people who haven't been able to keep a roof over their head because we head whatever direction we're heading. And that's a fear that sits in everybody's heart, very nearly everybody's heart. And the universal basic income, saying a Green New Deal society means you will be sure of security. You know, let's take that word back from the right. We do not get security from guns or weapons, or goodness help us, nuclear weapons. We get it from everybody having enough for a decent life. And let's paint a picture. You know, sometimes this will take political leadership, taking people with you. I can tell you about the city of Ghent, which is essentially, the centre is essentially car-free. And this was brought in by a green coalition. We're not the leaders of it. We had the green transport portfolio. And we had the kind of reaction we get whenever we start to talk about things like this in Sheffield. Oh, but the small businesses will all terribly suffer. And, you know, we can't live like that. And when I went to Ghent, it was about 18 months after they brought it in. And they'd encountered huge opposition. And they brought it in and they were just about to have an election a couple of weeks after I was in Ghent. And you know, the interesting thing was not one party in that election said they would bring the cars back. Even the far right had a sort of vague line that went, oh, we think it's a bit strict, so we want to make it a bit less strict. So in 18 months, something that had been hugely controversial and difficult was just like, wow, doesn't this make our lives better? Isn't it wonderful? In fact, there's a couple of streets in Ghent where they've had to ban bicycles because there's so many bicycles, it's a real problem for the pedestrians. Just imagine if we could do that inside the inner ring road in Sheffield. Well, okay, maybe not ban the bicycles, but, you know, get them just full of bicycles and pedestrians. But I think one of the things, I actually had to nip out and do a couple of errands at lunchtime, and we were talking about bringing people along with us, and I think what Fatima said before was terribly important about we have to reach out and make sure we do this in Darnall, in Burngreave, with different communities, speaking maybe even different languages to do this. But we also have to reach out. I spent some of my lunchtime, because I was wearing a green badge, talking to a small business owner and talking to her about how, you know, the domination of big businesses makes life almost impossible for small businesses. And those small independent businesses are our people too. You know, we want cooperatives, we want small independent businesses, we want strong local economies. So we've got to make sure that we talk to people like that too, And when we're saying, gosh, Shell or Rexon or somebody is terrible, we're not talking about the little local greengrocer. That's an entirely different category. And we've got to make sure we bring those people in with us, bring as many people together as we can. And I think just something to pick up from the discussion I was just in, there's another word we need to talk about a lot more. Our current society is profoundly corrupt. For 26 people to own half the world's wealth, that is a corrupt distribution of resources. And we also were discussing about the City of London, and I was sitting in the City of London recently thinking, I'm sitting in the middle of the most corrupt place on earth. And that's not what people often think about. But there's actually been, just in the last day or so, there's been a corruption scandal about fisheries in Africa. And that's what all the headlines said. The money came from Icelandic companies. Let's say the global north has a huge corruption problem, is destroying democracies in the global south or preventing people from setting up democracies. And that's part of the system we're trying to change with the Green New Deal. But I think I won't talk for too long because we've all had so much energy and so much excitement today, but we've got to eventually, and I've heard this mentioned a couple of times today, we've had 40 years of neoliberalism, neo-Thatcherism. Most of us in this room can't really remember anything else. But that came after we had a real change from 40 years of social democracy, 40 years of a different kind of political beliefs. We're now at a point where we're heading into a new political system. And if you look at the real foundation, what's the basis of the Green New Deal? What's the basis of green political philosophy? It's saying there's enough resources in this world for everybody to have a decent life and for us to live within the physical limits of this one planet if we just share them out fairly. That has to be the message. And I think there's a real reason why there's us on one side, broadly us defined, and on the other side there's the far right, the Brexit Party, the Front National, and worse. Because these are the two fundamental philosophies of today. Their philosophy says, oh, it's a dangerous, difficult world, there's not enough resources in it, we've got to grab as much resources as we can for us and ours, and shove those others away, whoever those others are. Build walls to keep those others out. That's their philosophy. Our philosophy is enough for everybody. And I was asked by a group of students, well, how do you know you will win? And I had to say, I don't know that we will win. I know that history is not written in stone. It's made. And what we're doing today is doing our bit, taking steps forward, learning things, sharing ideas that can help make our future the future for the world. So I've got a saying that politics should be what you do, not have done to you. So thank you everyone for all the politics you've been doing today. Let's go out and do lots more and get lots more people involved. Thank you.